Okay, so this is the final part, and we're going to look at minority influence. So we're going to look at consistency, commitment, and flexibility with regards to minority influence. Please be aware again that you need to revise research methods alongside this because that could come up in this topic area. But we're just going to have a look at minority influence. We've previously looked at explanations for obedience and explanations of resistance to social influence. Minority influence is a form of social influence in which a minority of people persuades others to adopt their beliefs, attitudes, or behaviours. So you have some case studies that you've looked at, so the civil rights movement and the suffragettes. There's also other examples that have been used in exam questions previously, such as recycling, gay rights, and smoking. I think smoking was the most recent one that's been used on an exam. So have a look through past papers and have a look at the examples that they use to ensure that you are familiar with the minority influence style questions and the topics that can come up as kind of like psychology and the economy type questions that can come up alongside this idea of minority influence. So a lot of these questions require you to either use the case studies or use an item to support the ideas of consistency, commitment, and flexibility with regards to minority influence. It might not be one of those questions. It might be an extended answer question. It might be a short mark question, a multiple choice question. We're not sure. But if you're familiar with some of the past paper questions, that will really help you in this topic of minority influence. So we've got consistency. So this is the idea that a minority must be consistent over time. We've got synchronic consistency, so they all say the same thing. And we've got diachronic consistency. They've been saying the same thing for some time now. A consistent minority makes other people rethink their own views. And it is suggested that we process minority views deeper than we do majority views. Then we have the idea of commitment. So the minority must demonstrate commitment to their cause or views. This could be through extreme activities that present some risk to the minority, so the augmentation principle, and this shows greater commitment and draws more attention. So an example of augmentation principle with regards to the suffragettes is the idea that they put themselves at risk. They went to prison for what they believed in. They were force-fed for what they believed in. And that's an extreme activity which would show their commitment. If we think about more recent examples, we've got Insulate Britain, who sat on the motorways, and then there was an injunction, and lots of those individuals were arrested and taken to court. And that shows their greater commitment to their cause, and it drew a lot of attention to that. However, commitment doesn't have to be shown through an extreme activity. For example, commitment could be someone taking their time to develop a presentation to support their views, or someone taking the time to conduct their own research or source different things. So like there's one exam question which looks at someone who wants to persuade another individual to go on a beach holiday, and they could show their commitment through going online and getting prices for all the different holidays, looking at all the different destinations, planning it all out for those people he would like to persuade to go. So that shows their commitment. So that's small tasks that are an inconvenience to an individual can also show commitment. And then we have the final idea of flexibility. So if a minority is too consistent, they can be seen as dogmatic and rigid. Members therefore have to be prepared to adapt their views and accept reasonable and valid counter-arguments. So if you are going to believe a minority, then they have to make sure that they adapt their message and they accept like reasonable changes in the law that could support their cause, and they don't go they might not go for the all out kind of every single home in the UK has to be insulated. They may adapt their views and they may say, okay, so if we actually look at older homes in the UK that are less energy efficient, or those individuals who are on lower incomes, and we ensure that they get their homes insulated. So it's kind of like flexibility with your point can help an individual believe in your cause. Then we have research to support this. You may also have the Nemeath study, which supports the idea of flexibility, and that's the courtroom study. But the main one I'm going to look at here is Moscovici's blue slide green. So in this study, there were 6 participants, 2 of which were accomplices of the experiment, and they had to estimate the colour of a series of blue slides which had varying brightness. The accomplices either incorrectly announced the slides as green on all of the trials, which was the consistent condition, or only on 2/3 of the trials, which was the inconsistent condition. Participants in the consistent condition called the slides green in 8.4% of the trials, compared to 1.3% in the inconsistent condition. So this shows that if the minority, so the 2 accomplices, were consistent, then the majority were more likely to support and take on board that point and give the same opinion. So it shows that a minority can influence a majority in this case if they are consistent. In evaluation, we have some more research to support the idea that we process a minority point of view deeper than we do a majority point of view. And this could be why minority influence is so important. And it can affect us for a longer period of time than a majority influence. So Martin et al. Found that when a group of participants heard a minority view, which agreed with a statement, they were less willing to change their opinions in light of conflicting evidence. So if you had a minority view and that minority view agreed with a key statement, then when someone came in with a piece of evidence that conflicted that original statement, you were less willing to change your opinion because you'd heard a minority agree with that statement first. This was in comparison to a group who had a majority agree with the statement. So it suggests that the minority message had been more deeply processed. It doesn't give us an explanation as to why that has happened, but it does suggest that we process a minority message more and we are more likely to believe in that minority message. Then the second evaluation point is a limitation, and this is the idea of artificial tasks. So one limitation of minority influence research is that the tasks involved are more often artificial and they fail to represent real life. For example, the blue slide green study. There's nothing trivial about that study. We don't have to really change our behavior or change anything about ourselves. It's not something that's long lasting. It's not something that's going to affect our everyday life. So it doesn't really represent the complexity of minority influence in everyday life. In real life, decisions are more complex. So political campaigning or jury decision making, and they have consequences as well, consequences to us and consequences to other individuals. So the findings of the research, such as Moscovici and the Nemeath study, they both lack ecological validity. And this therefore affects the validity of this idea of minority influence. Because we don't have ecologically valid research to support these ideas. But we do have some research that suggests that key parts of this are important in a minority influencing a majority. And like I said, make sure you have a look at the exam questions that have been on past papers to get an idea of the types of questions related to minority influence. There's a lot of questions with items in this topic area, and a lot of questions that require you to draw in information from your studies that isn't explicitly written in the question. So if you have a look at these questions and have a look at the mark schemes, you'll see patterns starting to emerge with regards to what the examiners want in these minority influence questions and answers. Okay, so that's all of the social influence information that has been given to us in the advanced information. Like I said again, make sure you revise research methods alongside this. Make sure you revise Milgram's baseline study and Ash's baseline study, just so you can make those comparisons to the variations in explanations of resistance and explanations for obedience that are really important here. Have a look back at this, pause it, make some notes, and complete the worksheet for this topic area. Okay, so that's social influence revision. We're looking at psychology, paper 1, 96 marks, 2 hours, and this section would be 24 marks and 30 minutes.